Welcome to Sewing with Sir Mari. Today we are going to make a surcoat for Baron Cullen, and I'm using the Inelgard tabard as my model, and I have made a pattern off of this. It has a split front, as you can see, and a split side, as well as just a circular neckline. For his, it's going to be all black, so that's going to make our photography a little interesting, but there's some tips and tricks I wanted to show you real quick on how to finish the split in the front and how to finish the splits in the sides so that you don't get them falling apart and they last longer for you. After cutting out this surcoat, I sewed together the side seams from under the armpit down to where I want the split to start in the side. And you can see it has a very large arm's eye, and that's just going to be turned and opened. And I want to show you how to brace this split here so that it is less likely to shred with pressure. This is a fighting garment, so it needs to have a little extra stability. In sewing up the side, I actually made this seam allowance quite a bit wider than I normally do. I put it at 2.0 because I want to be able to flip this seam allowance back on itself so I can finish this side seam off. And I'm flipping my side seams, the open area, I'm flipping this twice, about 1/4 inch, and then I'm turning it a second time. And when I get to this seam, the way that I'm going to finish this and add extra to keep that from ripping is I'm going to take a small piece of single wide bias tape, single fold bias tape, and I take that small piece and I'm going to lay it right at that where our opening begins, and I'm going to flip it underneath just like it's part of the seam on both sides, and then I'm going to sew across it here as well as sewing it into the seam, and that's going to give an area that if this gets tugged or pulled, it's not going to rip up into this bias strip, thus securing it. So here is the finished seam. You can see that I have tucked the bias tape into both sides. I have sewn across this with a bar tack. I've gone across this actually several times. I've sewn my side seam up and flat so that it does not have any raw edges. And as it's come into the armpit, I have put a bias strip there as well so that that prevents this from splitting and causing an open seam later on when he's fighting. So I've turned my side seam in 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch as I've continued down from where I had crossed it with the bias tape to hold it in place, and I'm finishing this edge, and I get down to where the bottom of the surcoat is, and I have some options on how I want to finish this corner. One way is that I can fold and fold so that this is over 1/4 and tucked in, and this is double folded 1/4 and tucked in, but that leaves me some edges that are not as clean as I would like. So there's a better option for this. If I've ironed this, you can see that there is a little grid of where all of this has gone. When this is done, this is how big this is going to be, and this is where this corner comes in, right? So if this one's folded and this one's folded, this is where that corner ends. So if that spot gets folded in at 45 degree, I can now fold these and miter them so that they make a very clean edge. You can see from where my press lines are that my point is going to go slightly beyond where my mitered edge will end. So I'm going to tuck that point in, and that way it'll keep that raw edge from being there. And if it was very heavy fabric, I could just cut that off. So this one gets folded once and twice, and you can see that that creates a 45-degree angle right here. I'm going to put a pin in there so that I don't have to try to manage everything at once with my fingers. Okay, and then if I fold this side up once, and then twice, I am folding it so that this becomes a lovely 45-degree mitered edge. So that makes a lovely corner. There are no raw edges, and I can futz with it to make it as precise as I need it to be. Okay, I'm going to sew this and then I'll show it to you once it's finished. Alright, here's our finished mitered corner. This is the inside of the garment. I sewed down here, I buried my needle, I turned it around this corner, and then I sewed this direction. And you can see that there are no raw edges because I tucked that little corner here underneath. I folded that in, and it gives a balance to both sides because they are folded the same amount of thickness, and you're not winding up with a heavy edge and a non-heavy edge. And this is my outer finished edge. So you can see that neither edge has any raw edges, and everything is nicely mitered in. I use this for when I'm doing anything that's a single layer that needs to have its corners tucked, whether it's a banner or a tablecloth or a surcote. We saw on the first finish of the side seam how to finish and secure a seam that has an opening but has actual two seams coming together. This is a slit cut in the fabric to come up to the front. So this is intact here with no seam, and I've just cut this with a slit here as I went. And now I want to roll these edges and bring them back so that they are secure. And I'm going to again roll those 1.25 inches. But the trouble comes when I get to this point. How do I secure this? This is the straight of grain, and if I grab both of these and pull, it's going to rip this all the way to the neckline. So what I do is I fold the first one and I put a pin here so that as I fold it, it comes to the narrowest of points. And then I fold it again and iron it. And again, it comes to the narrowest of points. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first sew this and secure it along this line. I'm going to go a couple stitches across the top, and then I'm going to take the other one and do the same thing. This leaves this without a huge gap. You could do this as a circle if you wanted. You could square it off. But to get this to come in as a point, this is a good method to do that, and it gives that more strength. To give a little added security to that, because just doing a bar tack across that is not going to guarantee me that this isn't going to shred up the grain line, I add another bias piece that I've tucked the ends in, and it already is tucked in on either side because this is a commercial piece. And I've sewn that into place over the end of where this folds. This is what it looks on the right side, just giving me a little square. And you can see that my absolute point is actually tucked in a little further. This isn't just right at the point, it's actually tucked a little deeper so that when I sew it, the open area is actually already into the bias tape. So you can see here, there is my bar stitch that went across there. This secures it all into place. And now this is very secure. And with all of the rough and tumble, it's not going to shred, and hopefully will last Cullen many years. Thank you for joining us. Sew well.